You keep flinching like I'm about to reveal your name out loud. Like I'm about to point at the exact spot in your chest where you stash the things you swear you moved on from. And it's almost adorable. The way you still think you can control what other people see when you've been leaking truth through your eyes for years. You sit there and you pretend you're calm. You pretend you're fine. You pretend you're reasonable. You pretend your thoughts line up neatly like polite little soldiers. But your silence is loud. You know that, right? It's loud like a locked door in an empty hallway. Loud like a smile held too long. Loud like hands clenched under a table so nobody notices they're shaking. And you've been using that silence as a costume, pulling it on every day because you learned early that words have consequences and feelings have price tags, and asking for anything makes you too much. So you got clever, you got quiet, you got low maintenance, you got easy to deal with, and everyone clapped for you because you were convenient, because you were neat, because you didn't take up space, and you thought that meant you were safe. You thought you could avoid being hurt if you stayed agreeable, if you stayed useful, if you stayed small, if you swallowed the sentence right before it turned into a fight, if you swallowed the truth right before it turned into rejection, if you swallowed the tears right before somebody called you weak. And look at you now. All that swallowing, all that shrinking, all that carefulness, and the pain still found you, didn't it? It found you in the exact places you tried to hide it. It found you in the hours when the world goes quiet and your mind starts replaying old scenes like a cruel little cinema you can't shut down. It found you in the moments you're supposed to be happy, and you're smiling, and there's that tiny crack underneath the smile where the cold air gets in. You know what I like most about you, though? It's not your misery. I've seen misery. It's not your fear. Fear is common. It's your loyalty to your own illusion. The way you still insist you're over it while you keep circling it. The way you keep saying, it wasn't that bad, while your body stiffens at certain voices, certain rooms, certain looks. The way you keep forgiving people in your head because it's easier than admitting they chose themselves over you and didn't even lose sleep about it. You polished your suffering into something presentable, didn't you? You turned it into jokes, into productivity, into I'm just tired, into it's nothing, into I've been busy, into that thin laugh you use when someone gets too close to the truth. And you got praised for it, because the world loves a wounded person who doesn't bleed on the carpet. The world loves a broken person who cleans up their own mess in the dark and comes back out smiling like nothing happened. And then you wonder why nobody ever really sees you. You wonder why you feel lonely even when people are around. You wonder why compliments don't land, why affection feels like it slips off you, why every nice thing said about you feels like it's meant for a version of you that doesn't exist. You trained people to interact with your mask, and now you're furious they don't know your face. But how could they? You've been handing them the mask first. You've been offering it like a business card. Here, this is the me that won't need anything. This is the me that won't bother you. This is the me that won't make you uncomfortable. And you've been doing it so long, you started believing the mask was your skin. You're scared I'm going to say it plainly, so I will. You don't just fear being rejected. You fear being accurately seen and then rejected. Because then you wouldn't have the comforting lie that you were misunderstood. Then you'd have to accept that someone looked straight at you and still decided you weren't worth the effort. That's the nightmare, isn't it? Not loneliness. You survived loneliness, not humiliation. You've swallowed humiliation with a straight face. The nightmare is clarity. The nightmare is knowing exactly where you stand in somebody's priorities. The nightmare is realizing how many times you waited for someone to choose you while they quietly chose everything else. And don't pretend you don't have a list. You do. A private little list in your head of moments you never talk about. Moments that look small to anyone else, but still cut you open when you remember them. Moments when you stood there ready to speak, and somebody talked over you like you were furniture. Moments when you reached out and got a late reply that felt like a hand pushed away. Moments when you finally said, "I'm not okay," and they turned it into an inconvenience. Moments when you needed protection and got advice. Moments when you needed loyalty and got excuses. Moments when you needed presence and got silence. You remember the exact tone of the laugh they used when you tried to be brave. You remember the exact pause before they answered. You remember the exact way their eyes slid past you. And you told yourself it didn't matter because you didn't want to become the kind of person who keeps score. But you keep score anyway. You just hide the scoreboard under your ribs. And you know what the funniest part is? You still want them to come back and finally say the right thing. You still fantasize about the moment they realize what they did. You still rehearse what you'll say when they apologize. You still carry the script like it's a sacred text. And it's not because you're weak. It's because you're addicted to closure you never got. You're addicted to the idea that if the story ends neatly, then the pain was justified. Then your patience wasn't stupidity. Then your silence was noble. But your silence wasn't noble. It was fear dressed up as dignity. It was survival pretending to be virtue. It was you bargaining with the world. If I don't cause trouble, if I don't demand, if I don't confront, maybe I'll be loved. And I hate to be the one to ruin your little trade agreement, but love doesn't get negotiated with self-erasure. It doesn't bloom in the space where you keep disappearing. You didn't just lose people, you lost yourself in the process of trying to keep them comfortable. And now you're sitting here, staring at me like I'm the villain, like I'm the one cornering you, like I'm the one making it hard to breathe. But I'm not doing anything you haven't done to yourself. I'm just refusing to let you look away. I'm just refusing to let you soften the truth into something you can digest without choking. Because you've been choking for years and calling it fine. You have this habit, this little ritual when you're alone. You replay conversations you didn't have. You imagine you stood taller, spoke clearer, didn't laugh when you were hurt, didn't apologize when you were right, didn't shrink when they stared, didn't freeze when the room went cold. And for a second, it feels good. It feels like power, like you can rewrite the past. But then you come back to the present and you punish yourself for being the version of you that existed then, the version of you that didn't know what you know now. And you call that punishment accountability. But it's not accountability, it's cruelty. And you've been cruel to yourself in ways you'd never dare be to anyone else. You give everyone else context and patience and benefit of the doubt. You hand out excuses like blankets, but when it's you, when it's your mistakes, your hesitation, your need, suddenly you become a judge with no mercy. Suddenly you act like you should have been born wise, like you should have predicted betrayal, like you should have seen every lie before it was spoken, and when you didn't, you decide it means you deserved what happened. That's not logic. That's a desperate attempt to feel in control. Because if it was your fault, then you can prevent it next time. If it was your flaw, then you can fix it. But if it was simply that people can be careless, selfish, unfaithful to their own promises, then you'd have to accept a world where you can do everything right and still get hurt. And you hate that. You hate the randomness. You hate the helplessness. So you turn the knife inward and call it reason. And you're so proud of how self-aware you are. You wear that word like armor. But listen to me. Awareness without action is just another trap. Another room you pace in. Another way to feel busy while staying stuck. And you've gotten very good at staying stuck. You've decorated your cage with insight. You've hung pretty little theories on the bars. You've named your wounds, categorized them, explained them, and still you live inside them. You say you want peace, but you keep choosing familiar pain because it's predictable. You know the shape of it. You can brace for it. You can plan around it. And peace is unfamiliar. Peace would require you to stop scanning for danger. Peace would require you to stop trying to earn your place. Peace would require you to accept that you are allowed to exist without performing. And you don't know how to do that. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being loved meant being useful, being quiet, being impressive, being strong, being whatever made people stay, and you became a professional at it. You became the listener, the helper, the reliable one, the one who checks in, the one who carries, the one who remembers birthdays and softens conflict and absorbs stress, the one who doesn't break. And every time you did that, every time you swallowed your own need to manage somebody else's comfort, a small part of you learned the same lesson. My pain is not welcome. My truth is too heavy. My voice is a problem. So be silent. And then you wonder why your chest feels tight when you try to speak, why your throat closes when you try to ask, why your hands feel strange when you try to reach out, why you'd rather suffer privately than risk being seen as needy, dramatic, difficult. You've been trained, and not by some grand enemy, not by a single monster you can point to, but by 100 small moments where your honesty wasn't held gently, where your softness was laughed at, where your boundaries were treated like insults, where your no was negotiated, where your sadness made people uncomfortable, where your anger got you labeled. You became cautious, and caution became identity, and identity became prison. Look at me. I'm not here to pet your head. I'm not here to tell you you're special because you survived. Survival is common. The streets are full of survivors. Offices are full of survivors. Families are full of survivors. Survival alone doesn't make you alive. It just makes you not dead. And you didn't come here to be not dead. You came here because you're tired of being a ghost in your own life. You're tired of being present only in obligations. Tired of showing up for everyone else and coming home to a quiet that feels like punishment. Tired of feeling like you're always one mistake away from being abandoned again. You know that feeling. That tight, sick feeling when someone's tone changes and your brain immediately goes to the worst place. When a message takes too long and you start building disaster out of minutes. When someone cancels and your mind hears, "You're not important." When someone criticizes one thing and you hear, "You are a failure." And you try to act normal. You try to play it cool. You try to be the person who doesn't overreact. But inside you're scrambling. Inside you're begging. Inside you're bargaining. Inside you're a child again, trying to figure out how to keep love from leaving. And then you hate yourself for it, because you tell yourself you should be stronger. You should be past this. You should have healed by now. You should have moved on. You should have stopped caring. And every should you throw at yourself is just another chain. Stop pretending the past is past just because you don't talk about it. Silence doesn't erase. Silence preserves. It keeps the wound in a jar, sealed tight, and you carry the jar everywhere, and you call it composure. I can see the jar in your hands, the way you grip it, like if you loosen your fingers you'll spill everything, and you're terrified of spilling. Not because the pain is ugly, but because you don't trust anyone to stay if they see how deep it goes. You want me to be cruel, don't you? You want the clean cruelty, the kind that feels like certainty, the kind that slices through your confusion, because confusion is exhausting, because uncertainty keeps you awake, because you're tired of guessing where you stand. So here's your certainty. You have been betrayed in small ways more than you admit. And the worst betrayals weren't always dramatic. They were quiet. They were ordinary. They were the everyday choices people made that told you the truth about your rank in their life. It was the friend who only called when they needed something. The relative who praised you in public and dismissed you in private. The partner who loved the comfort you gave but resented the needs you had. The colleague who took your ideas and left you the labor. The person who watched you drown and offered a lecture instead of a hand. You collected these moments and you tried to make them mean something good. You tried to turn them into lessons. You tried to turn them into strength. But you skipped the part where you let yourself feel what it actually was. Loss, humiliation, grief, rage, disappointment. And that skipping is why it still lives in you like a low fever. You don't like the word rage. You prefer frustrated. You prefer stressed. You prefer overwhelmed. Because rage feels dangerous. Because rage threatens your identity as the calm one, the kind one, the one who doesn't make a scene. But rage is not evil. Rage is information. It tells you where you were violated. It tells you where you were reduced. It tells you where you let someone treat you like you were optional. And you know what you did with that rage. You pressed it into a smaller shape. You turned it inward. You became strict with yourself. You became harsh with your own mistakes. You started punishing your own needs because it felt safer than directing anger toward the people who actually hurt you. Because directing anger outward risks conflict, and conflict risks abandonment. And abandonment is the wound you built your whole personality around. So you became polite. You became accommodating. You became the person who says, "It's okay," when it's not. Who laughs when it stings. Who changes the subject when the truth gets too close. And you call that maturity. But it's not always maturity. Sometimes it's fear wearing a suit. And you're so smart about it, too. You can explain everyone's behavior with perfect empathy. You can map their childhood, their stress, their triggers, their intentions. You can defend them better than they can defend themselves. And that's impressive, really. It's a talent. But it's also how you keep yourself trapped. You keep understanding people who refuse to understand you. You keep excusing people who would never carry you the way you carry them. You keep offering the benefit of the doubt to those who treat your trust like a renewable resource. And when you finally get tired, when you finally feel the weight of it, you don't say, "This is unfair." You say, "What is wrong with me?" As if your exhaustion is a character flaw, as if your limits are a moral failure. You've been trained to believe that your worth is tied to your output and your patience and your silence. So when you can't output, when you can't be patient, when you can't stay silent, you panic. Because you think the only reason people tolerate you is because you are useful and easy. And I'm going to say something you've been avoiding. Some people did not love you. They managed you. They enjoyed you. They benefited from you. They leaned on you. But they did not love you in the way love is supposed to work. Because love doesn't require you to amputate your voice. Love doesn't punish honesty. It makes room for it. Love doesn't demand you stay small. It protects your growth. Love doesn't ask you to be invincible. It stays when you shake. And maybe nobody modeled that for you. Maybe you learned early that affection is conditional, that praise is earned, that safety can be taken away with one wrong move. And you adapted. You became a reader of faces, a translator of tones. You learned to predict moods, to adjust yourself like a thermostat, to sense when a room is turning against you before anyone says a word. That skill kept you alive, yes, but it also turned your nervous system into a watchtower. And now you can't rest, because you're always scanning, always checking, always bracing. You call it thinking ahead, but it's anxiety dressed as responsibility. You call it being realistic, but it's fear wearing logic. You call it being humble, but it's self-erasure pretending to be modesty. You've turned pain into a philosophy because it hurts less than admitting you were hurt. It hurts less than admitting you were desperate for tenderness and you didn't get it. And before you flinch away from that word, tenderness, listen, you weren't wrong to want it. You weren't weak to need it. You weren't ridiculous for hoping someone would see you and stay. You were human. And humans are built to connect, built to be held, built to be witnessed. And you spent too long acting like you can outthink your own humanity. You can't. You can distract it, you can postpone it, you can bury it under work, under responsibilities, under entertainment, under endless scrolling, under late night plans, under helping everybody else, but you can't erase it. It always comes back. It always asks again, who actually knows me? Who actually chooses me? Who actually stays when I'm not performing? And that question is the one you keep trying to silence, because the answer has been painful more often than not. So you choose a different question, a safer question. What can I do to be better? What can I fix? What can I improve? Because improvement gives you a sense of control, and control feels like safety. But here's the cruel part. You can become flawless and still be unloved by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You can become perfect and still be abandoned by someone who needs you to stay imperfect so they can feel superior. You can become everything and still be treated like nothing by someone who is empty. So stop making your worth dependent on people who cannot hold it. You keep replaying the moment you were ignored, the moment you were dismissed, the moment your loyalty was taken for granted, and you keep asking what you should have done differently. But that's not the real question. The real question is why you stayed after the pattern was clear, why you negotiated your dignity, why you accepted crumbs and called it a meal. And I know the answer. You do too. Because you were afraid that if you demanded more, you'd end up alone. And being alone felt like proof that you were unlovable. So you chose company over respect. You chose attachment over truth. You chose silence over confrontation. And every time you did that, you paid with a piece of yourself. That's the debt you're carrying. That's the weight you feel when you wake up tired, even after sleep. That's the heaviness behind your eyes when someone asks how you are and you lie automatically. You're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you betray yourself in tiny ways all day. And betrayal is expensive. You don't need someone to save you. You need you to stop abandoning you. So when I say be silent, I don't mean the old silence, not the frightened silence, not the silence that begs for permission, not the silence that swallows truth to keep peace in a room where you never had peace anyway. I mean a different silence. The kind that stops feeding the world your inner life like it's a public service. The kind that stops explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are. The kind that stops arguing for your basic decency to those who enjoy watching you plead. You have been noisy with your pain in all the wrong ways. Not with your mouth, no, you rarely speak it, but with your choices, with your energy, with your constant need to prove that you're worth staying for. You've been auditioning for love, auditioning for respect, auditioning for belonging, and you're exhausted because auditions never end. There's always a new judge, a new standard, a new way to fail, and you keep doing it. Because you think if you perform hard enough, the room will finally clap and the wound will finally close. But the wound doesn't close from applause. It closes from truth and time and consistent self-respect. And self-respect is not a speech. It's not a mood. It's not a quote you repeat when you feel strong. It's the boring, brutal, daily behavior of not negotiating your boundaries for comfort. It's walking away without dramatic exits. It's declining without a long explanation. It's letting silence sit in the air when someone tries to bait you into defending your worth. It's choosing not to chase closure from people who specialize in withholding it. It's accepting that some doors will never open, and you don't need to keep bruising your shoulder against them. You've been confusing persistence with loyalty. You've been confusing endurance with submission. You've been confusing patience with permission to disrespect you. Endurance is not staying in the same place while someone wears you down. Endurance is carrying yourself through the discomfort of change, through the loneliness of choosing better, through the panic of not being needed by the people who used you. And yes, it will feel lonely at first, because your identity has been built around being the one who's always available, always understanding, always there. And when you stop, there will be a silence so sharp it will scare you, because you'll realize how much of your life was noise you created to avoid sitting with yourself. But that fear is not a warning to go back. It's a sign you're finally stepping into a room you've avoided. The room where your own thoughts live without an audience. In that room, you will hear things you don't like. You will hear the truth of your resentment, the truth of your grief, the truth of your desires, the truth of your anger. And you will be tempted to numb it, to distract, to run back to old patterns, to old people, to old stories, because the familiar pain feels warmer than unfamiliar discipline. But you cannot build strength by crawling back to what broke you. You build strength by standing in the discomfort without collapsing into it, by letting the emotion rise and fall without turning it into a decision that ruins you. You are not your feelings. You are the one who witnesses them. And you've forgotten that, because you've been living like every feeling is an emergency. It's not. Sadness is not an emergency. It's a signal. Anger is not an emergency. It's a boundary alarm. Fear is not an emergency. It's a body remembering. You don't need to obey every signal like a command. You need to interpret it like information. And that's where the silence comes in. Because silence gives you space to interpret instead of react. Silence gives you time to notice the pattern before it pulls you. Silence gives you the gap where choice lives. You've been living without that gap. You've been jumping from stimulus to response like a puppet. And then you call yourself weak when you end up in the same place again. You're not weak. You're untrained. And training is not glamorous. Training is repetition. Training is doing the small thing again and again until your body believes the truth your mind already knows. You want to be stronger, but you keep looking for a moment of transformation, a dramatic night where everything changes. And that's not how it works. Strength is built in ordinary mornings, in ordinary decisions, in small refusals to abandon yourself. It's built when you wake up and don't reach for validation, when you sit in quiet and let your mind settle instead of feeding it noise, when you speak a clean no and don't decorate it with excuses, when you choose to be consistent rather than impressive. You think discipline is punishment because you only met it criticism, but discipline is care in a hard form. It's love with a backbone. Discipline is you keeping promises to yourself even when nobody is watching, especially when nobody is watching, because you've spent too long performing for eyes and not enough time building for your own foundation. Be silent about your plans. Be silent about your progress. Be silent about your pain, in the sense that you stop making it a public negotiation and let your actions speak with a calm that doesn't beg. There's a difference between hiding and guarding, and you need to learn it. Hiding is fear. Guarding is wisdom. Hiding says, I am ashamed. Guarding says, I am precious. And you have treated yourself like you were disposable for too long. Stop offering your heart like a free sample to people who don't even respect what it costs you to stay soft in a hard world. Stop handing out access because you confuse attention with care. Stop letting someone's temporary warmth rewrite their long history of inconsistency. You need to become the kind of person your pain has been trying to force you to become. Clear, steady, honest, deliberate. You don't have to be loud to be firm. You don't have to be cruel to be strict. You don't have to be cold to be untouchable. You can be gentle and still be unmovable. You can be kind and still say, that ends here. You can feel deeply and still refuse to drown. That's mastery, not numbness. You've been flirting with numbness because it looks like relief. But numbness is just a different cage. Mastery is feeling the weight and still walking straight. I've watched people like you crumble not because the world was too hard, but because they kept trying to earn a softness from people who only respect strength. You don't need to become a monster. You don't need to become ruthless in the cheap way. You need to become disciplined in the quiet way. And yes, it will offend some people, because they preferred you when you were easy to manipulate with guilt and silence and approval. They'll call you changed. They'll call you distant. They'll call you selfish. And you will feel the old panic rise, the old urge to explain, to apologize, to smooth it over. But that urge is the leash. And if you keep grabbing the leash every time someone tugs, you'll never walk free. You don't need to convince them. You need to be consistent. Let their discomfort be theirs. Let their misunderstanding sit. Let their opinions bounce off you like rain off glass. You've been too porous. You've been absorbing everybody's weather and wondering why you're always cold. And when the room finally gets quiet, when the noise of other people's expectations fades, when you're not rushing to fix, not rushing to prove, not rushing to be chosen, you're going to meet the part of you that has been waiting patiently behind the pain. The part that remembers what you wanted before you started living for permission. And that meeting is going to hurt. Not because that part is cruel, but because you will grieve what you postponed. You will grieve the years you spent making yourself smaller. You will grieve the words you swallowed. You will grieve the times you stayed where you weren't respected. You will grieve the love you tried to build with your own hands while the other person held nothing. Grief is not weakness. Grief is a receipt. It's proof you paid for something, and you paid a lot. You've been carrying so much unspoken grief that it turned into heaviness, into exhaustion, into irritability, into that strange emptiness where even good things feel distant. You thought something was wrong with you because happiness didn't stick. But happiness doesn't stick to a heart that's holding back tears from 10 different years. You can't keep stacking new moments on top of old wounds and pretending the foundation isn't cracked. So yes, you're going to feel it, and you're going to want to run. And I'm telling you not to. Sit there. Let it come. Let it pass. Don't turn grief into a story about your worth. Don't turn it into a verdict. Let it be what it is. A wave. A storm that moves through. You've been treating every emotion like a permanent identity, and that's why you get scared. You get sad and you think, I'm broken. You get anxious and you think, I am doomed. You get angry and you think, I am bad. But you are not those things. You are a person with a nervous system and a memory. Your body remembers what your mouth never said. Your shoulders remember the times you made yourself small. Your stomach remembers the nights you waited for messages that didn't come. Your jaw remembers the arguments you avoided. Your chest remembers the apologies you accepted that weren't really apologies. And if you don't give your body a new pattern, it will keep repeating the old one. This is where your discipline becomes mercy. Breathe slower than your panic wants. Stand up straight when shame tries to fold you. Speak one honest sentence when your old self would have lied. Walk away once when your old self would have begged. These small acts are not small. They are revolutions inside a life built on fear. You keep wanting a dramatic rebirth, but real rebirth is quiet. It's not fireworks. It's a steady refusal to return to self-abandonment. It's you learning to tolerate the discomfort of being misunderstood, the discomfort of disappointing someone, the discomfort of not being needed, the discomfort of sitting alone without calling it failure. Because you've been equating loneliness with worthlessness, and that equation is poison. Loneliness is sometimes just the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the hallway, not the destination. And yes, it will echo. And yes, it will tempt you. It will whisper that you should go back to the familiar noise, back to the people who gave you scraps, back to the role where you were valued only for what you provided. But you have to learn to hear that whisper and not bow to it. Be silent enough to hear the difference between your intuition and your fear. Fear yells, fear rushes, fear demands immediate relief. Intuition is calmer. It speaks once. It doesn't beg. You've been confusing fear's urgency for truth, and you've been calling it gut feeling. But it's not always gut. Sometimes it's a scar twitching. So slow down. Let time reveal. Let consistency be the measure. Stop falling in love with potential. Stop trusting words without behavior. Stop giving your heart to someone's promises when their actions keep stepping away. You don't need to become suspicious of everyone. You need to become loyal to your own standards. You don't need to hate people. You need to stop chasing them. You don't need to harden into stone. You need to strengthen into steel. Steel still has shape, still has purpose, still has flexibility, but it doesn't shatter when pressure hits. You become steel by repeated heat and repeated cooling, by repeated challenge and repeated recovery. Not by one big moment, not by one speech, not by one night of clarity. And if you're waiting for the pain to disappear before you start, you'll wait forever. Pain is part of the process, but it doesn't have to be the driver. You can carry it without letting it steer. You can acknowledge it without worshiping it. You can learn from it without building a shrine. You've been so afraid of becoming bitter that you let people keep cutting you. Thinking forgiveness means access. Thinking patience means tolerance. Thinking kindness means compliance. It doesn't. You can forgive and still close the door. You can understand and still leave. You can have compassion and still enforce distance. You can be a good person without being everyone's cushion. And here's the part you don't want to hear because it removes your favorite excuse. Nobody is coming to deliver the life you want. Nobody is coming to rescue your voice from your throat. Nobody is coming to give you permission to matter. That permission has to be taken quietly, daily, by you, through choices that honor the truth. It's not romantic. It's not dramatic. It's not the kind of thing people applaud, and that's why it works. Because the moment you stop performing for applause is the moment your strength becomes real. And real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just stands there, calm, refusing to be moved. So now you understand the title you've been living under without realizing it. Be silent. Not because you are powerless, but because you are done begging. Be silent when the old urge rises to explain yourself to someone who is committed to misunderstanding. Be silent when your ego wants to win an argument that will cost you peace. Be silent when your wounds want to chase validation like a starving animal. Be silent when your fear tells you to compromise your standards to avoid being alone. Be silent when someone throws bait in front of you and waits for you to react so they can call you unstable. Silence is not absence. Silence is control. Silence is you choosing the next move without letting your emotions throw dice. You spent years letting other people's moods dictate your posture, your tone, your worth. Like you're standing on a stage and the audience decides if you exist. But the stage was never yours. It was theirs. And you've been performing on it for crumbs. Step off. And when you step off, you're going to feel naked at first because you won't have the old script. You won't have the old habits. You won't have the quick fixes. You won't have the little rituals of seeking reassurance, and your mind will panic and call it emptiness. It's not emptiness. It's space. And space is where you build. Build routines that don't depend on anyone's praise. Build standards that don't bend for anyone's attention. Build a life where your self-respect is not a negotiation. You've been acting like your heart is a public square, like anyone can walk in and leave their footprints, and then you wonder why it feels dirty. Guard it. Not with paranoia, with boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that keep love out. They are doors that decide who comes in and how. And if someone gets angry at your boundaries, that's information, not a tragedy. You've been terrified of making people angry, but anger is not always danger. Sometimes anger is just someone losing access. Let them be angry. Let them be disappointed. Let them be confused. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is your integrity. You keep asking how to heal, and I'll tell you. You heal by becoming the kind of person who no longer tolerates what hurt you. You heal by practicing honesty in small doses until your body stops treating truth like a threat. You heal by choosing yourself in the moments you used to betray yourself. You heal by leaving the room when disrespect walks in, even if it comes wearing a familiar face. And you will stumble, yes. You will relapse into old patterns. You will almost text the person who never shows up. You will almost apologize when you weren't wrong. You will almost laugh to cover pain. You will almost shrink when someone raises their voice. And when that happens, don't use it as proof you're failing. Use it as proof you're learning. Learning is messy. Discipline isn't perfection, it's return. Return to the truth. Return to the boundary. Return to the calm. Return to yourself. You've been abandoning yourself for so long that returning will feel like betrayal at first. Betrayal of the old identity. Betrayal of the role people expect you to play. But that's the price, and it's worth it. You keep waiting for the world to become gentle before you become strong. But the world doesn't make deals like that. You become strong first, and then gentleness finds you differently. It finds you as peace inside your own skin. It finds you as the quiet confidence of not needing to be believed by everyone. It finds you as the relief of not chasing what runs. And if you're scared that becoming strong will make you cold, listen carefully. Strength doesn't have to be cruel. Cruelty is weakness with a sharp edge. Strength is calm with a spine. You can stay humane and still be unbreakable. You can stay soft and still be firm. You can feel and still endure. Endurance is the point, not destruction, not collapse, not escape. You don't get to disappear. You don't get to throw your life away because people failed you. You don't get to hand your future to the worst day of your past. You owe yourself the stubborn act of continuing, and continuing with discipline, not with wishful thinking. You've been waiting for someone to finally understand, and maybe they never will. That doesn't mean you're doomed. It means your freedom can't be dependent on their comprehension. You've been waiting for someone to finally apologize properly, and maybe they never will. That doesn't mean you're trapped. It means you stop letting their lack of closure dictate your peace. You've been waiting for the old pain to stop knocking, and it will knock sometimes, but you don't have to invite it in for dinner anymore. You can. Acknowledge it like a stranger at the door and then go back to building. And building is quiet. Building doesn't announce itself. Building doesn't argue. Building doesn't beg. Building happens when you stop telling the world what you're going to do and you start doing it. Be silent and let your life become the evidence. Let your calm be the answer. Let your boundaries be the speech. Let your consistency be the revenge you never needed. And when the night comes, when the old loneliness whispers that you're invisible, you sit with it and you don't panic. Because invisibility is not death, it's privacy, it's protection. It's a chance to become without being interrupted. You have spent too long being shaped by other people's hands. Now you shape yourself. And if your hands shake while you do it, good, do it anyway. If your voice trembles the first time you say no, good, say it anyway. If your chest hurts the first time you don't chase, good, breathe through it. Pain is not a stop sign, it's a toll. Pay it and keep moving. And when you finally stand in a room with someone who respects you, someone who doesn't punish your honesty, someone who doesn't demand you shrink, you'll realize the truth that should have been obvious all along. You were never too much. You were just in places that were too small. So stop crouching. Stop whispering apologies for existing. Stop confusing silence with safety. Choose silence as discipline, silence as strategy, silence as strength. Be silent and listen to the part of you that has been speaking through every sleepless night, every tight breath, every bitter laugh, every moment you felt unseen. You are done living like your life is a negotiation. You are done begging to be treated with basic respect. You are done handing your dignity away for temporary comfort. You will endure, not as a victim of the world, but as the owner of your choices. And if you have to walk through a long, quiet stretch to get there, then walk it quietly until silence stops being your prison and becomes your blade, your shield, your center, your strength. And you're going to hate how simple it is once you finally see it. Because you've been building this whole dramatic cathedral of suffering in your head. These stained glass stories about why you are the way you are. And then the real mechanism underneath it is just a lever you kept pulling. You kept handing the steering wheel to anyone who looked like they might stay. You kept letting the loudest voice in the room decide what you deserved. You kept treating approval like oxygen and then acting surprised when you felt like you were suffocating the second the room went quiet. You want some big villain to blame, a single face you can point at so you can hate cleanly, because clean hate is easier than messy responsibility. But the truth is uglier and calmer. You cooperated with the pattern. You participated in your own erosion, not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, but because you were trained to trade your truth for safety, and you never updated the deal even after you grew up. You're still living by the rules of a version of you that had fewer options, fewer words, fewer exits. And that's why you keep feeling trapped, even when the door is right there. Because you're still acting like you need permission to leave. Like you need a reason that won't make you feel guilty. Like you need the other person to understand before you're allowed to choose yourself. And that's the lie that keeps you crawling. This idea that your peace has to be justified to people who were never interested in protecting it. You keep trying to win cases in imaginary courtrooms, building arguments in your head, collecting evidence, rehearsing speeches you'll never give. Because some part of you still believes that if you explain perfectly, if you prove your pain was valid, someone will finally stamp your file and say, approved, and then you can rest. But rest doesn't come from winning imaginary trials. It comes from closing the courtroom. It comes from refusing to keep arguing with ghosts. It comes from letting the verdict be what it already is. You were hurt. It mattered. And you are done negotiating about it. You think you need someone to acknowledge it for it to be real. But reality doesn't require witnesses. Reality requires acceptance. And you've been refusing acceptance because acceptance feels like letting them get away with it. But acceptance isn't forgiveness. Acceptance is clarity. It's you stopping the fight with the past so you can stop bleeding into the present. You keep saying you want to move forward, but you're dragging the old scenes like chains. Not because you enjoy pain, but because you believe pain is proof you cared, proof you were loyal, proof you had a heart. You don't trust yourself to be good without suffering, do you? You don't trust yourself to be honorable without being punished. Because somewhere deep down, you confuse ease with guilt. You confuse peace with laziness. You confuse happiness with something that has to be earned through hardship. And if it shows up without a struggle, you get suspicious, like it's counterfeit. That's why you sabotage calm. That's why you keep stirring the water, picking at old wounds, reaching back toward old chaos. Because chaos feels honest to you. Chaos feels like home. And calm feels like a trap that will snap shut the second you relax. So you stay tense on purpose. You stay vigilant. You keep a small emergency burning inside you like a pilot light. Because you think if you're always braced, you won't be surprised. But the cost of living braced is that you never fully live. You only anticipate. You live in the next moment, the next threat, the next rejection, the next disappointment. And then you call it being prepared. When really it's just you refusing to let your body learn safety. And listen, I'm not telling you the world is safe. It isn't. It's full of careless people and selfish people and confused people who will hand you beautiful words and empty hands. I'm telling you that you can become safe for yourself. And that kind of safety is harder because you can't outsource it. You can't rent it from someone else's affection. You can't borrow it from being needed. You can't purchase it with performance. You build it by becoming consistent, by becoming someone who doesn't abandon you when you're uncomfortable, by becoming someone who tells the truth even when your voice shakes. And your voice will shake, because your truth has been locked up for so long it comes out like an animal blinking in daylight, uncertain, defensive, ready to run. You'll want to slam it back in the cage the first time someone frowns at you, the first time someone goes quiet, the first time someone says you're different. And that's where the real fight is. Not with them, with you, with the reflex that says, retreat, apologize, smooth it over, restore the old balance where you are small and everyone else is comfortable. You've been mistaking everyone else's comfort for harmony, and you've been calling your own discomfort drama, and that's backwards. Harmony that requires you to disappear is not harmony. It's surrender dressed up as peace. And don't pretend you don't know the sensation of surrender. You know it intimately. It's that moment you're about to speak, and you decide not to. It's that moment you're about to set a boundary, and you soften it into a joke. It's that moment you're about to walk away, and you turn back because you're afraid of how they'll interpret it. It's that moment you choose silence, not because it's wise, but because it's easier than being misunderstood. You've done that so many times that your own mouth has learned to betray you automatically. Your own mind starts preparing excuses before you even realize you're upset. Your own heart starts bargaining before it even asks for what it needs. So the rebuilding starts with catching that betrayal at the moment it happens, like catching a pickpocket's hand in your pocket. You don't need to scream. You don't need to make a scene. You just need to calmly remove the hand and put your wallet back where it belongs. That's what boundaries are. Calm hands, clear eyes, no performance. You've been afraid boundaries make you harsh, but harshness is when you punish. Boundaries are when you protect. Protection is not cruelty, it's responsibility. And I know you've been carrying responsibility like it's a curse, because you were the one expected to handle things, the one expected to be composed, the one expected to fix problems you didn't create. And you got so used to that role that you started taking responsibility for how everyone else felt, as if their emotions were your job, as if their disappointment was your failure, as if their anger was your fault. But their emotions are not your leash, and if you keep letting them yank you around, you'll never build a life. You'll just keep reacting. You're going to have to let people feel what they feel without jumping in to rescue them from it. The same way you're going to have to let yourself feel what you feel without turning it into a collapse. This is the part you avoid because it requires patience, and you hate patience when it's for you. You're patient with everyone else, but with yourself, you want instant relief, instant certainty, instant proof that you're healing. And when you don't get it, you think you're failing. You're not failing, you're detoxing. You've been addicted to external reassurance, addicted to being needed, addicted to the rush of fixing, addicted to the short-term comfort of saying yes, even when you meant no. And now you're trying to live without that poison. And your mind is going to throw tantrums the way any addicted mind does. It's going to tell you you're empty, you're unlovable, you're doomed, just to get you to run back to the old supply. Don't negotiate with the tantrum. Observe it. Let it flare. Let it burn out. You don't have to obey every thought just because it speaks in your voice. Your mind is a machine that repeats what it has been fed, and you fed it fear for years, so of course it produces fear. Feed it discipline, feed it truth, feed it consistent action, and slowly it will learn a different language. And this is where you stop romanticizing healing, because healing isn't candles and soft music and inspirational sentences. Healing is the unglamorous grind of choosing better when your old self begs you to choose familiar. Healing is sleeping on time when you want to numb yourself at night. Healing is eating properly when you want to punish your body. Healing is moving your body when you want to sink into the couch and disappear. Healing is doing your work with integrity when nobody is praising you. Healing is keeping promises to yourself even when you feel like you don't deserve it. You keep treating your body like a container for your mind, like it's just a thing you drag around. But your body is your witness. Your body remembers every time you swallowed words, every time you forced a smile, every time you stayed in a room that made you feel small. And your body has been trying to speak through tension and fatigue and restlessness and headaches and that strange tightness you can't explain. Listen to it, not with panic, with respect. You don't have to become obsessed, You just have to stop ignoring. Ignoring doesn't make pain disappear. It makes it hide until it hits harder. And you know about hidden pain, don't you? You're an expert. You can carry a whole storm behind a calm face. You can hold it together so well that people think you're cold, when really you're just holding a flood behind your teeth. You learned early that if you cried, you'd be mocked or dismissed or pitied. And pity felt like humiliation. So you got good at freezing your face, at speaking evenly, at turning grief into, "I'm fine." But grief doesn't vanish when you deny it. It just goes underground and starts digging tunnels under your life. It shows up as irritability, as cynicism, as tiredness, as a short fuse, as a constant feeling that something is missing. You think you need a new job, a new relationship, a new city, a new distraction. But sometimes what you need is to sit in a room with yourself and let the grief finally tell the full story, without you interrupting it with logic. Logic is your favorite shield. You use it like a knife. You slice your own feelings into acceptable pieces. You label them, you analyze them, you explain them, and you think that makes you strong. It makes you controlled. Strength is different. Strength is being able to feel without drowning, to acknowledge without collapsing, to remember without being dragged back. Strength is holding your own hand through the memory instead of abandoning yourself in it. And yes, there are memories you avoid, not because they're dramatic, but because they're humiliating, because they make you feel foolish, because they show you the moment you begged for something you should have walked away from, the moment you stayed after disrespect, the moment you apologized to keep someone who didn't deserve you, the moment you laughed along with a joke that cut you, the moment you let someone rewrite your reality and you nodded just to keep the peace. You think those memories prove you're weak, but they prove something else. They prove you were hungry for love and you didn't know how to feed yourself. So you ate whatever was offered, even if it was rotten. Hunger doesn't make you pathetic, it makes you human. Staying hungry when food is available, that's what has to stop. And food, real food, is not someone's approval. It's not being chosen by a person who keeps you anxious. It's not a compliment that disappears the second they're in a bad mood. It's not attention that comes and goes. Real food is self-respect, structure, routine, honest companionship, purpose, clean conscience. You want the sweetness of comfort without the discipline of building it. And that's why you keep going back to people who can give you a quick hit of warmth and then disappear. Quick warmth is addictive. It feels like relief, but it always costs you later. You pay with anxiety, with rumination, with self-doubt, with the sick feeling of waiting. Stop buying comfort on credit. Stop financing your peace with future pain. You've been living like a person who keeps taking loans from a bank called Maybe, and the interest is your sleep, your focus, your dignity. The bank always approves you, of course, because it knows you'll pay. You always pay. You pay with another apology, another excuse, another piece of yourself. You call it hope, but sometimes Hope is just denial wearing perfume. Real hope is disciplined. Real hope is quiet. Real hope says, I will build even if nobody claps. I will endure even if nobody understands. I will become even if nobody notices. And when you adopt that kind of hope, you stop needing to chase, because you stop basing your life on who stays. You base it on who you are. And who you are right now is a person with a wounded loyalty reflex. Your loyalty kicks in too early. You bond fast to anyone who gives you a taste of recognition. You start investing in people before they've proven they can carry anything. And then you feel betrayed when they drop it. That pattern is not fate, it's programming. You can reprogram, but to reprogram, you have to stop calling your pattern love when it's really fear of abandonment dressed as devotion. You can be devoted. You can be loyal. You can be caring. But devotion that costs you your self-respect is not devotion. It's desperation. And I know you hate that word because you want to believe you're above it. You want to believe you're dignified. But dignified people can be desperate too. They just hide it better. You hide it by acting calm, by acting indifferent, by acting like you don't care. But then you care in secret. You care in the dark. You care in the quiet. You care so much it makes you sick. Stop pretending. You don't have to be dramatic. You just have to be honest. Honesty doesn't mean you spill your guts to everyone. It means you stop lying to yourself. It means you admit, quietly, without shame, I want to be respected. I want to be loved properly. I want to be treated with consistency. I want my presence to matter. I want my voice to count. Those wants are not sins, they are normal. The mistake was trying to earn them by disappearing. You don't earn respect by becoming smaller. You earn respect by becoming clearer. Clarity is not loudness. Clarity is steadiness. Clarity is saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Clarity is leaving when the pattern is clear. Clarity is not staying to see if it changes when it's been the same for years. Clarity is understanding that closure is not something you receive, it's something you decide. And decision is where your power lives. You've been living like you have power only when someone chooses you. But your real power is in your choices, and you've been neglecting it like an unused muscle. Start using it. Choose your habits. Choose your environment. Choose who gets your time. Choose what you consume. Choose the standards you live by. Choose what you tolerate. These choices are not glamorous, they're repetitive, and repetition is what makes you strong. And if you're waiting to feel confident before you choose, you'll wait forever. Confidence is not the prerequisite, it's the result. You act with discipline first, and confidence follows like a shadow. You act with integrity first, and self-respect grows quietly. You act with patience first, and peace becomes familiar. You act with boundaries first, and safety begins to take root. And there's something else you need to hear. Something you've been avoiding because it scares you. Some of your pain is not from what others did, it's from what you didn't do. It's from the doors you didn't close, the words you didn't speak, the opportunities you let rot because you were afraid of failing publicly, the apologies you gave yourself too late, the dreams you postponed until they started feeling embarrassing. You've been hurt by others, yes, but you've also hurt you. And you keep trying to escape that guilt by focusing on other people's wrongs. That's convenient. It keeps you righteous. But righteousness doesn't rebuild your life. Ownership does. Ownership doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything. It means claiming the part that is yours so you can change it. You can't change other people, but you can change what you allow. And that's where your rebuilding becomes real. You don't need revenge. You don't need theatrics. You don't need to show them. You need to become the kind of person who no longer gives their heart to the same kind of hands. And when your old self cries, "But they were all I had," you answer calmly, "Then I will build more." When your old self says, "But I'll be alone," you answer calmly, "Then I will learn to stand alone without calling it failure." When your old self says, "But what if nobody comes?" you answer calmly, "Then I will still become." Because your growth cannot be conditional on being witnessed. Your discipline cannot be conditional on being praised. Your endurance cannot be conditional on being understood. And that's the hardest shift for you, because you've been living for a long time like your life needs an audience to be real. You don't need an audience, you need alignment. Alignment between what you believe and how you live. Alignment between your values and your boundaries. Alignment between your words and your actions. When you have that alignment, you stop needing people to validate you because your life validates you. And that's what silence becomes. Not emptiness, not hiding, but alignment. Quiet on the outside because the inside is no longer at war.